Greetings, magical mavens. Here on this channel, we know that celebrating the Sabbats on the Wheel of the Year isn't just about decorating, cooking, and setting up an altar, as much as we love to do those things. But it's also a powerful manifesting tool that we can tap into to design the life of our dreams. So in this episode of the Alchemy of Affluence podcast, I've invited Ashera Star Goddess to share some of her wisdom on how to manifest using the power of seasonal alchemy. Ashera is a manifestation mentor here on YouTube, and she teaches the power of spiritual science. By better understanding how the universe works, we're able to both expand and simplify our spiritual practice to focus on just the things that are most powerful and fulfilling. We invite you to sit in on our chat today, where we're talking about the expansive power of thinking of the cycle of the year as a spiral versus just a wheel of the year, spiritual science and the sacred geometry of manifestation, journaling rituals, and the magic of building evidence of your own power through gratitude, the power of teaching others as you're learning what you need yourself, some tips on teaching kids to manifest while also benefiting from the pure manifesting power that children have, manifesting with seasonal alchemy, and some manifestation and spellwork tips for the Samhain season. We invite you to pour yourself a cup of something cozy and join us for this magical conversation. Welcome, Ashera. It's so nice to finally talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
So, for those of you guys listening, Ashera is really into this concept of working with the spiral instead of the wheel of the year. So when I invited her on to talk about the wheel, she was like, you know what? Let's talk about the spiral instead because it's more expansive. So first things first, what is the difference between the concept of the wheel of the year and the concept of the spiral of the year? Like, I have my way of thinking of it, but I would love to know like your explanation.
Okay, so this is kind of my own thing, but I'm sure it's written somewhere. But I feel like a spiral is more of a self-powered type of motion. And I believe that a wheel is more of needing an outside type of power, whereas a spiral only needs one push and it creates its own power after that. So that power would definitely come from knowledge and reading and learning new things. So with like the autumn season here and it's back to school, everybody's learning. I believe that knowledge is that power that creates that spiral, because when you learn something new, you look at things totally different and it's more innovative. And let's just say you're celebrating the autumn season or the autumn equinox and how it's been traditionally celebrated for years and years and years. But then let's say you read a book and learn about the deeper meanings behind like the words that we use, like autumn, au is gold, tum or tus is the Latin form of settling or falling. So the gold falls, the leaves fall, it gets darker, the sun is less this time of year. So if we go into the meanings of certain things, we get a deeper, level of knowledge, which then empowers us to create in different ways, interpret in different ways, and celebrate each season in different ways the more that we learn. And it could also represent how things keep getting more and more detailed and intricate than maybe just like, versus a folk story. You get the scientific version instead, but then you have the academic version, which you could also use, to write books or to understand things on a deeper level. So I like learning and expanding, and letting that inspire, empower me to the next level. And so, for example, instead of celebrating the same way I did last year or doing the same things that I did last year, I'm like leveling it up and stepping it up a notch to reading more, doing more artistic things, and learning more about, this wonderful experience that we have called life.
Yeah, I love that. And I totally agree. I think I read this somewhere, but I don't remember where. But I heard this idea that like masculine energy is like a straight line, and then feminine energy is like a circle. And then when you put those together, you get this sort of spiral of life. Like, have you heard of that? Or like, what are your thoughts on sacred geometry?
I mean, it makes perfect sense, but because that is what keeps everything going, literally. So it makes perfect sense. I've never heard of that, but, I'm always, up for learning things. So it does make perfect sense where a line or linear time versus spiral time, um, thinking in terms of time and how things are measured. If you put both of those together, I believe that creates eternity.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like I remembered hearing it and being like, that makes sense. So when we were chatting earlier in the emails, you mentioned that your thing is spiritual science, which I love that because it's like it's taking two things that sometimes we tend to think of separately and sort of remembering that it's actually the same thing. So like what would you describe spiritual science as? And what is the spiritual science of like your perspective on the spiral?
I would say it's more of an alchemy, and with the modern technology, more of an energy and an alchemy type of knowledge that's kind of all melted together. And a lot of the knowledge that you get from alchemy and, technology and things like that, as far as electricity, wireless energies going through, the atmosphere and things like that. That goes all the way back to alchemy. That goes back to like, ancient times. It goes back to Tesla and all those types of, you know, things that we might not realize are all merging together. So I feel that this the study of like spiritual science is very much an alchemy for modern times.
Yes. And I love that concept too. The podcast is called the Alchemy of Affluence podcast because I love the concept of alchemy, where you're sort of taking whatever materials or elements are available and using your consciousness to sort of create something different. And I feel like that's what we're basically doing when we're working with the Wheel of the Year in more of like a psycho spiritual or self-development way. Because like we're looking at this sort of circular pattern for stability, but we kind of use that stability to grow and expand and experience more. Like, is that kind of how you would define it?
Yes. And also like the spiritual science part of it, it's like ideas, words, and the actual substance that turns those things into the physical. Um, I believe that a lot of the seasonal changes that occur, during the wheel of the year, have a lot to do with the degree of how much energy is being used and how easily it can be to manifest at certain times of year, or just connect more with the spiritual side of things, because manifesting, creating something from, just speaking or writing about it or thinking about it, it is a very spiritual scientific thing that has to go from your thought, and then when your brain thinks a thought, a neuron fires, and so that's electricity. And since our brain and our bodies are made up of material substance and also water, that electricity, that spark, and then the water combined creates like a fourth state of matter, which is what they call plasma. And then that goes up into the ethers and sends out a vibration. And then in return, we get what we're thinking about, the law of attraction, or correspondence or things like that. So it goes into the science of it, but we usually talk about things and we say, oh, we do a spell or we manifest, but breaking down the science and the spiritual aspect behind it is definitely something very interesting. It can help you speak new words, different words to create more of a change in your life. The tone that you speak, the amount of breath that you give out when you say something, whether you're in a colder environment or a more hot environment, how powerful are your words? How powerful is your speech? And, since we're like talking on Zoom and online, it's a whole different level because a lot of the screens that we look at, they're called plasma screens. And so it's very scientific, but very simple at the same time. So I feel that knowing these things can help us manifest better and maybe perform our spell work better and look at life a little bit more magical, as I would say.
Yeah, never underestimate the power of magical thinking. Like that is definitely something to remember. So I would love to know, because I know manifesting is kind of your thing. So how would you work with, say, a particular season, like say the season we're in, to manifest? Like, would you take the themes of the season and kind of work it in with whatever you're doing? Or like, what would that look like?
Well, I'm kind of creative, so yes. I think of autumn and this time of year as a season for harvesting, a season for honoring those that have passed before, and a season for, they always say the thinning of the veil and just getting warm and, tucked in for the season and the upcoming winter. I feel like working with a lot of those, things such as ancestors or maybe someone who has passed away that you like the ideas of. So maybe reading a book by someone who's no longer alive, honoring their memory and keeping their art and their work alive. Because I think after we pass, our work lives on, our ideas live on. So I definitely believe in honoring those that have passed before us who we admire or can learn from. Because if you really think about it, a lot of us actually are learning from people that are no longer here. The books we read, the knowledge we learn in schools, so on and so forth, the technology that we continue to use. So I believe that's a major part of it. And I also believe that also being creative at the same time is very important because we can't get swept up in, death and all that too much. So I think that's where the artistic side comes in, and crafting and painting and writing and all that sort of stuff can help you have a better balance. And doing spell work, using the natural elements around you that, come with the seasons. So like pumpkins, leaves, hay, different herbs that are harvested this time of year. I definitely believe in using all of those in your work or even in your decoration, even if it's not real, because I live in Texas and Houston, and there's barely any leaves on the ground, so I had to buy some fake leaves. But it's still the energy that's there and how you vibrate and how you feel when you are, thinking about the seasons.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there too around like where you live and like the temperature and all of that sort of stuff. So I remember you mentioned earlier that one of the reasons you prefer to look at the spiritual science of the seasons is because you do live in a climate where you don't necessarily see as much change outside of yourself. And you kind of mentioned how seeing the spiral within your life is it's not that the seasons themselves are a crutch per se. I don't remember how you described it, but kind of like when you're looking for stability outside of yourself, we can turn to the seasons or turn to nature in some way. But then when we're ready to kind of expand beyond that, then we kind of look at the more internal spiral. So, can you just elaborate on that a little bit? I feel like you went into an awesome tangent in the email, and I would love for people to get to kind of hear your perspective on that.
Okay, sure. So I feel like the wheel is something that we became dependent on. As long ago, we didn't have all this technology that we have today. A lot of people weren't as stable financially as many people are today. So the seasons meant more to them, like harvesting, getting a crop so they could sell, or to preserve for the winter and upcoming months. It meant more of a survival type of thing. So nowadays, we can order things online with our fingers and it'll be here tomorrow. So I think more people are leveling to a balance where they don't feel as dependent on the seasons unless they work in that business. So a lot of people who don't work in any type of business that depend on seasonal changes, like seasonal businesses, they tend to maybe want something deeper, more aesthetic, more vibey, I would say. So they start looking internally as to how to expand and romanticize the seasons versus, how to survive and implement just different, rituals and things like that outside, but more now I say people are using seasons as more of a way to internalize, get to know themselves, and are reflecting on what it means to them personally. And so I believe that it's a lot of people in the world that still are in survival mode, but I say majority, they're not anymore financially. And so I feel like the wheel may be something that they use to commemorate, remember, honor the ancestors as well, and do the rituals that they used to do because they did depend on a lot of things. But now I see it being more romanticized, and aesthetics and all these things are the way that our generation chooses to honor seasons.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like, even as someone who I've lived pretty much my whole life in New York, so I do very much experience that like visceral change in the seasons. But I feel like even in spite of that, I feel like we just because of the way we live now, where like even someone who's super broke, for example, still probably has a place to live and something to eat. So like we're not out there toiling in the fields or hunting and gathering or like anything like that. So we have the luxury of being able to kind of ponder and we have a lot more just time and space on our hands to kind of feel into like what is this thing called life like what is going on here. And so like I came to my practice actually in a state of survival mode. Like it was many years ago in my early 20s, and I had just gotten out of college and I didn't have like a good career figured out. And I ended up moving into this apartment that someone else picked out while I was on vacation in the summertime. So we thought it was like going to be comfortable. And then when winter came, it was freezing. Like it was just really bad. And I think that was the year when I really kind of got real with myself and was like, hey, I've been on this sort of willy-nilly spiritual adventure here where I'm just kind of exploring different subjects and letting things sort of happen to me. And I'm ready to really create some intentional change in my life. Like I'm ready to manifest. Like that was when the manifestation aspect really started to become important to me, because I wanted to manifest being more warm and comfortable, having, more resources, being able to, not live with a bunch of roommates because I don't like living with people. I like to be in my own little space so I can ponder and think and all of that. And so that was when I really started sort of working with the cycle of the seasons to create tangible results. And And now that like that is behind me and I'm in a much more comfortable situation in my life, but there's still a lot of things that I want to create and change. But I also still want to kind of look back and see, because I manifested some epic stuff at that time. Like I really did. And so I'm looking back and I'm like, what did I do right? In the manifestation community, we always hear you don't want to be manifesting from a place of desperation because that's going to create more of a cycle of desperation, or like what you're trying to manifest won't work, or blah blah blah. But I don't know if I fully believe that, because on the one hand, yes, like if you start a cycle of desperation, you can easily be blindsided and end up in another crappy situation or whatever. But at the same time, I was really desperate in my early 20s and I manifested so much. So I'm almost wondering like if there's a little bit of like a conundrum happening here. Like what are your thoughts on some of these manifestation tips that seem to be sort of like contradictory?
Okay, well, that's easy for me because when you manifest out of desperation, it's not the desperation that you're manifesting with. It is the feeling, it's the frequency, it's the vibration of how bad you need or want, or how bad something is that you're trying to attract, or like how bad you're trying to attract something. So your magnetism is stronger. Um, and so I feel if you can find the same energy and feeling, the same magnetism to attract and manifest what it is that you want with maybe another feeling besides desperation, you're going to be able to do it just as easily. So it could be anything. It could be love. It could be wanting like some type of major thing to happen in your career. It could be something for another person that you really want something for. It could be happiness. It could be excitement. This is why I feel like the aesthetics and the internalizing of each season allows us to romanticize and use our visualization and our imagination to see ourselves exactly where we want to be, not out of desperation, but out of love for self, beauty, the aesthetics, the feeling of being somewhere almost like a fantasy. So I think a creative type of person who makes movies, you know, their visualization is going to be able to be more creative in, making storyboards, pitching a script, and things like that, versus someone who maybe wrote a script out of desperation and it was really good, but their next movie or their next script is they're not going to be desperate because they have money. So where do you get this motivation from if it's not in a place of desperation? It comes from the love of what you do and the excitement behind it. So I feel like if we really love what we're doing and we're manifesting to be happy and love what we're doing first, then that's just going to come naturally.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Even comfort, right? Like comfort is a certain vibration that can become a little bit stagnant. You know what I mean? Where it's like, yeah, I'm comfortable and I want more, but it's like that excitement maybe is the piece that can be missing sometimes. So would you say that like the reason why sometimes people are able to manifest when they're desperate is because they do have that excitement, but the sort of next level of moving on in the spiral would be desiring something and sort of removing the negative connotation from that excitement. Isn't that like the difference between like being anxious and being excited? It's like that the fear factor, right? So are you saying kind of like remove the fear and keep the excitement, and that's how you manifest beyond what you need?
Yes, it's sort of like when you like if you have a gratitude journal and you write all the things that you're thankful for and grateful for, and you see just how much you already have, your mind is going to start saying, well, how did I get all these wonderful things? Um, I'm magical. Look at all the things that I've manifested. Wow, like your frequency is literally raising right there, and you're accepting your own power. You are validating your own power, and you're allowing yourself to feel powerful and also thankful at the same time. So when you go back to manifest, you already know what you can do. So you're using that as a platform and as self-esteem as far as your manifesting powers are going. So you don't really need to go back to the survival mode, or you don't really need to think the fear or negative things or be anxious about it, because you have accepted your power. You've validated yourself by going back and looking at all the things that you've manifested and are grateful for, and that all the support and things that you have acquired over the years. I have manifestation journals that I had from years ago, and I would say 99% of the things in there are checked off. And I always go back to that when I start feeling any type of doubt or fear that I'm not going to be able to do what I want. And it doesn't ever have to happen overnight. It just needs to happen to where I will grow from that experience in my confidence from manifesting. And so that the next time it gets easier and easier. So I say use your old journals and things like that to create the feeling and self-confidence, and boost your ego a little bit, so to say, on your manifesting abilities. And that way the fear and all of that and the anxiousness will turn into more of a confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like confidence is such an important aspect of manifesting, especially like, again, from this place where you're no longer desperate, right? Because, like you said, the desperate energy is such a strong thing in and of itself that it can manifest just from like you wanting something so badly. Whereas, like, when you don't desperately need or desire something, that motivation might not seem like it's there. But if you give yourself permission to see that your own confidence is actually what manifests something, because like I think when we're desperate, we're like, I have to figure this out. So I'm going to. I'm a determined person. So I have to figure it out. I have to manifest it. Whereas when you don't desperately need something, you can kind of more easily fall into this pattern of like, I don't know, like I really want to change, but if I don't, I'm sure I'll survive. It'll be fine. So, and I feel like you are a very confident person. So, what are your tips for gaining more confidence in someone's manifesting abilities, even if they're not in a place where they desperately need something?
Well, I'm kind of lucky in that way. I have kids, and they're witnesses to a lot of the things that I manifest, or a lot of the things that happen, after I speak them into existence. So I have, those types of witnesses, I would say, to even, help with my level of confidence in manifesting. So if there are any witnesses, friends, anyone, even if it's just yourself writing something down, um, and maybe you telling someone about it, and they actually see the proof, like maybe from your journals and in your current life, that can also help build your confidence. Also, teaching other people, helping other people, and it working for them builds your confidence, because it means you know what you're talking about. So I think it was Napoleon Hill that said, whenever you have an issue that you can't figure out, go and help someone else. By teaching them, you'll solve your own problems. So that's kind of what I feel that most people can do to build their confidence, is to have witnesses, claim your power, and teach other people how to use whatever you've learned, and get their testimonies and how it worked for them. Whether it's someone leaving a review or just sending a thank you card or whatever. I feel that all those little things add up, and once you've had a lot of that, your confidence level, it's slowly built, and it's on a good foundation, because you have proof, evidence, and in your own life, as well as other people telling you how you've helped them. So I believe helping other people definitely is part of that.
Yes, I totally agree. And I'm curious, do you believe in the concept of like the law of divine compensation, where like by helping other people, you magnify your own ability to receive on an energetic level? Or do you feel it's more just kind of circumstantial from like by teaching, you also learn more?
I feel like it's by teaching you learn more. I think that's more for me, like my thoughts on it, because we have the answers within. But when we see from a different perspective, let's say we help another person with their perspective, we're stepping out of our own perspective momentarily and we're looking at someone else and we see exactly everything wrong with their situation. And we can say, you need to fix this, and that. But it's hard to do that for ourselves. And so when we see that we can, step out and see another perspective and fix everything wrong with that person or with their situation, or just give them some advice that they can't see for themselves, we then look at ourselves and say, you know what, maybe I should try that too. Because I think a lot of times we stand in our own way. And when we help other people, we see that they're humble enough to take our advice and allow us to, tell them whatever it is that we felt like telling them. And so then we're more receptive to other people giving us advice and listening more and opening ourselves up to other people who are seeing us from a different perspective. And then we may see symbols, signs, someone may tell us something that may solve our problem. And the whole time it was just us resisting because we felt like we could figure something out on our own. But when we go and help someone, it also makes us vulnerable in our own thinking that we should allow someone to help us as well, whether it's taking advice, listening to someone, and learning from someone else's experience. So I believe it's more of that than, helping someone else to get something in return, because I don't think that's the right reason to help someone. And because it's not really helping if you're expecting something back in return. I believe that's also a way of creating more fear and anxiety in the future, because you feel like if you don't do something, you're not going to get the result. So then you fall into a pattern of feeling like you have to do something. So if you do it for your own, you know, ability to see from a different perspective and to help another person, and you know that the answers are going to come eventually, I think it's more the right reason than expecting something when giving something.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I mean, I've experienced this too because I have this complex where I want to take everything that I learned and like save the world somehow. And it can be so overwhelming. And usually it's in those moments where I feel really overwhelmed and I'm like looking out at the world and seeing all these problems that I want to fix that I end up like getting into some kind of a rut. So thank you for that, for that reminder. I would also love to know, how do you teach your kids about this? Do you kind of just let them observe you manifesting through these cycles, or do you kind of like teach them in a more intentional way? I'm sure those of our viewers who have kids would love to know.
Okay, well, when they were a little bit younger, like in elementary school, like young elementary school, maybe like first, second, and third grade, we would manifest together. Like we would get magazines, and they would get a little notebook spiral and cut out the things that they wanted, and they would paste them in the notebook pages, and we were manifesting together. And we were all, I remember the time that we were manifesting, we were all together, cutting out stuff, saying, oh, I want to go here for vacation. Oh, I like this house. Oh, I like this, pair of shoes, and things like that. And it was just whatever they wanted, they cut out and put in the spiral notebook. And so the excitement that kids have, they don't think that, it's not going to happen for them. They feel like they're picking out their Christmas list or their birthday presents or something like that. And so their frequency is very powerful. And so I teach them that, what you think about and what you really are excited for, you're going to manifest. And like I said, I was showing them, they were my witnesses to all the stuff that we manifested that same day. Me being able to check off 99% of what I put in my journal, and they still had their journals and they were looking through it and they had mostly everything in it too, whether it was toys or some outfit or, just something silly, but they saw how it worked. And also, synchronicities, they see synchronicities a lot because I point them out. And so then they start telling me about, the synchronicities that occur to them and how they manifested something and it happened. And so I kind of let them, experience it for themselves. But I did, let them know how it's done. And I don't push anything on them. I don't push any spiritual beliefs on them. I will let them know what I'm thinking and how I do things, but I never allow them to, think that they have to believe as I do or do as I do. It just, whatever they feel works for them, that's what works for them. I don't believe that giving a child a certain way to think at a young age before they can really understand what they're doing is helpful to them. So I allow them to allow the knowledge and all the synchronicities and, manifestations to, help mold them on their own. It will if you just let it happen naturally.
Yeah, I think that's where adults are challenged. It's like we feel like we got to do it right or, do it by the book instead of just letting our own natural magic take form. So thank you so much for all of this amazing wisdom that you dropped in here today. Half of my subscribers probably already know you because you probably sent them. So thank you. But for anyone listening who hasn't heard of you, where can they find you?
Ashera Star Goddess on YouTube. Also have an Instagram. I also have another channel for more like leveling up and things like that called Ashera 7. But more of my spiritual knowledge is on Ashera Star Goddess. So that's where y'all can find me.
Well, yay. Thank you so much. I have been following you for years. So this is kind of a wonderful little full circle moment here. Thank you so much for being here, and hopefully I'll get to chat with you again soon.
All right. Thank you for having me. Bye.
So, Magical Mavens, what are your thoughts on the topics we touched upon in this conversation? I would love to know what your experience has been with spiritual science, sacred geometry, or literally anything else that came up for you during our chat. I invite you to share your experience in the comments. And if you haven't already, I also invite you to subscribe to Ashera's channel. She has several videos out for the current Samhain season, as well as an expansive library of content from previous years. And for more seasonal living magic, I invite you to check out this playlist right here.